People often say, don't go to the favelas, don't go near those places, and they're too dangerous. But what if that advice is missing the point? Behind the warnings is a world of incredible stories, culture, and resilience that defies the stereotypes. In this video, we'll get to the real deal of life in these communities, the harsh realities, and the incredible beauty that makes favelas so cool and often dangerous in Brazil's city landscape. Favelas are informal urban settlements that are scattered across the cities of Brazil, Rio, and Sao Paulo. They pop up on the hillsides or outskirts of the cities where there's no planning or regulation. Born from the rapid urbanization and migration of the poor in the 20th century, favelas are symbols of struggle and resistance. Their narrow streets and improvised houses show life on the edge, where residents create communities that are vibrant and close-knit in difficult conditions. It's estimated that over 1.2 million people reside in the favelas of Rio alone. To understand favelas is to understand the bigger social and economic issues of Brazil. These are home to millions of people who face specific challenges: no infrastructure, no services, and high violence. But they're also full of culture, creativity, and community. To explore favelas is to get into the urban complexities in Brazil and solutions for their residents. Let's look at how favelas came into existence. The history of the favelas of Rio de Janeiro starts at the end of the 19th century. Brazil was transforming from an empire to a republic. As the country went through many political changes throughout the 20th century, the slums of its second biggest city, Rio de Janeiro, grew in size and number. Initially, these were informal squatter settlements that sprouted up to house internal migrants and itinerant workers. An itinerant worker is a worker who usually travels around a region, working for short periods in different places. As the slums grew and became more populated by an urban underclass, favela residents started to organize themselves. They formed Associações de Moradores, or residents' associations. These were forums to discuss community governance, and this acted as a bridge between favelados, the favela residents, and Prefeitura, the city hall. Since the city and state governments didn't extend many public services to the favelas, the community members, led by their local associations, started to provide the basic needs, such as sanitation, medical care, and transportation. By the mid-20th century, favelas in Rio de Janeiro started to be noticed by politicians who wanted to fight poverty and modernize the city. In the 1940s, Mayor Henrique Dodsworth introduced proletarian parks as a temporary housing for favela residents. These parks were meant to be a stepping stone to permanent housing, but quickly fell into disrepair and were abandoned. By the 1960s and 70s, the focus shifted to removing favelas aggressively, partly driven by real estate interests who wanted to develop the inner-city land. With a more authoritarian government in power, led by military generals and politicians like Carlos Lacerda, a big removal campaign started. Displaced favela residents were relocated to public housing on the outskirts of the city, where conditions were often bad. The government created agencies like the Housing Company of Guanabara and the National Housing Bank to manage these efforts. Churches also tried to help, but their solutions were as controlling as the government's. Despite all this, the housing shortage was not solved, and the favela population kept growing. By the late 70s, the eradication policy was abandoned, but the damage was done. Around 140,000 people were forcefully displaced. The city's poorest citizens were pushed to the margins of society. But looking at the positive side for a bit, it wasn't all bad in the 50s to 70s. Some progress was made. The Reclaiming Service for Favelas and the Community Development Company were starting to make changes in favela infrastructure and were empowering the residents. This was the foundation for future urban development that would tackle the favela problem better. Now, let's shift our focus to the present day. Many favela residents are hoping the UPPs can finally close the long-standing gap between them and full city participation. The Pacifying Police Unit, abbreviated UPP, is a law enforcement and social services program pioneered in the state of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which aims to reclaim territories, most commonly favelas, controlled by gangs of drug cartels. The UPPs combine security and social welfare, a departure from the past when military police and urbanization projects worked in separate silos. Previously, military police actions caused terror and were ineffective due to corruption and the strength of drug traffickers. Urbanization projects were blocked by armed groups that prevented community participation. The UPPs use a holistic approach. They don't just enforce the law, but foster community growth by combining security with social and economic development. For the first time, residents in these UPP areas are participating more in civil life. A resident from Santa Marta said about this change, "We have pride and visibility for our community. Even Madonna came to visit." While UPPs are not perfect, they're a big effort to empower favela communities. With more attention to police misconduct and real community involvement, the program can bring lasting change to Rio's favelas. Life in the favelas is a mix of struggle and community. Homes are built with whatever's available. They're cramped together. Roads, sewage, and electricity are often non-existent, making everyday life harder. Water supply is erratic, and many people rely on communal water, or they buy from vendors. However, favelas residents are super resilient and often come together to help each other. In favelas, social dynamics are all about community and relationships. Families and friends live close together, so there are strong support networks. Neighbors look out for each other, and there's a sense of belonging. Economically, many people turn to informal jobs to survive. This could be street vending, small business, or working in local services. These jobs might not be stable, but they keep the community alive and the economy moving. Despite that, unemployment is still quite high. It was up to 50% in 2016. Another constant headache for the favelados is crime and violence. Many favelas are controlled by drug trafficking and gangs. These groups control parts of the community and can put people in danger. Violence can be a daily threat, from children to adults, and this makes safety a major issue. More about this issue later in the video. Health and sanitation are other big issues for favela residents. Many areas have limited access to healthcare services, so it's hard to get medical attention when you need it. Malnutrition, diarrhea, and other diseases are very common. Lack of necessities can cause health problems and affect overall life, especially in infants. It's reported that infant mortality is 50 per 1,000 compared to 15 per 1,000 nationally. Furthermore, life expectancy in Rio's favelas was 13 years less than in the richer areas of the city. Education is another challenge for favela residents. Schools in these areas are often underfunded and don't have the same facilities as schools in other well-off neighborhoods. This makes it harder for students to get a good education and limits their options in the future. Many children resort to work to support their families. There have been several major operations in Brazil's favelas. In 2008, the government launched pacifying police units, UPPs, in Complexo de Alemão to retake areas controlled by drug traffickers. The operation was met with fierce resistance, and the military was called in with armored cars and air support and was heavily criticized for the impact on residents. In November 2010, a massive operation to dismantle the Red Command, Comando Vermelho drug cartel, in Complexo de Alemão. It involved thousands of police and soldiers, helicopters, and armored cars. The big operation caused many casualties and a lot of damage, but only reduced gang control for a short time. In 2017, gang violence in the Roxina favela forced the Brazilian army to be deployed, with tanks and military personnel to restore order. Despite that, the effectiveness of that was questioned. The May 2021 raid in Jacarezinho was against the Pereza drug gang. The operation had many casualties and was criticized for the violence and impact on the community. These operations show the difficulties of combating gang violence with military interventions. Despite the difficulties favelas face, they're cultural and creative hotspots. Music and dance are at the core of favela life. Samba and funk are the main genres in daily celebrations. Samba's played at parties and events. Funk, born in the favelas, mixes beats with social commentary and is the spirit and struggle of the community. Art and creativity also thrive there. Graffiti and street art cover many walls, turning them into colorful paintings that reflect the lives and dreams of the residents. Local artists use these public spaces to tell stories, send messages, and beautify their surroundings. This art not only makes the favelas look beautiful, but also gives the residents pride and identity. Community events and festivals are another highlight of favela life. From street parties to traditional celebrations, these events bring people together and show off the cultural heritage of the place. Residents can celebrate, have fun, and strengthen their bonds with each other. The energy and creativity of these gatherings are the resilience and joy of favela life. Whether you like them or not, favelas are part of Brazil's identity. They constantly appear in movies, music, games, and literature. Funk music has gone global, bringing the sounds and stories of favelas to the world. Literature and documentaries also tell the residents' stories, adding more depth to the favelas. Movies like City of God and Elite Squad show the harsh reality of life in favelas, the struggles, and the community. The media's portrayal of favelas shapes public opinion. Some portrayals bring awareness and empathy, while others perpetuate stereotypes and portray the residents' struggles. How favelas are represented is how the world outside understands and addresses them. Accurate and respectful media is key to understanding life in favelas and to improving conditions. On a different note, favelas tourism is growing, and tours are offering visitors a peek into the lives and culture of these communities. This has its pros and cons. On the one hand, it could bring economic benefits for the poor residents of favelas and can help in cultural exchange. On the other hand, it raises questions about the exploitation of the residents for entertainment and the authenticity of their experiences being shown to outsiders. The impact of favela tourism on the residents is mixed. Some benefit from the extra income and visibility, while others feel their lives are being commercialized. The attention brought by tourism can sometimes overshadow the real problems of these communities. So it's important to approach these tours with sensitivity and respect for the people living there. The Brazilian government's launched several programs to tackle favela issues. Housing programs to build better houses and upgrade existing ones. Infrastructure projects to improve roads, sanitation, and access to basic services. These are to address some of the favela problems and create a more sustainable environment for the residents. But government policies also mean more police and public security to combat crime and violence. These often involve partnerships with local authorities and security forces to reduce gang activity and make the place safer. Many criticize the approach as being too focused on security and not on the root of poverty and inequality. Some programs are poorly implemented or don't make a difference in the lives of the residents. Though it might seem generic to state that the government's trying to help the poor and needy, the government's facing a gigantic challenge. There isn't a quick fix for this problem. In general, these changes are part of a broader effort to integrate the favelas in the Brazilian cities for better or less socioeconomic reasons. Favelas exist because of a combination of social, economic, and political factors. They offer affordable housing and are a vital space for many who would otherwise face a severe housing shortage. The scale of urban migration and the historical neglect of these areas make it impossible for the government to solve everything at once. While conditions are being improved, favelas will be part of the Brazilian urban landscape because they house the lower-income population, and it's impossible to eradicate them completely. As we're coming to the end of this video, it's important to discuss what lies ahead for favelas. Favela's future is made of opportunities and challenges. Urbanization is changing the landscape. New developments sometimes displace long-time residents. As cities grow, there are efforts to integrate favelas into the urban fabric through better infrastructure and services. However, these changes can create tensions between new and old residents. Poverty, inequality, and social exclusion still affect favela residents. Despite progress, many still face big barriers to economic growth, education, and healthcare. But there's hope and resilience in these communities. This balance of challenges and achievements means we need to keep supporting and finding new solutions. In short, favelas are complex and dynamic, full of culture, but also with big challenges. Supporting favela communities means not just acknowledging their problems, but also their resilience and capacity to grow. Well, that'll be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Do leave a like and click the subscribe button so you don't miss any updates from us. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.